My name is Anita Tillman. I am the Communications Director for the Louisiana Municipal Association, and we represent 305 municipal and local governments across the state of Louisiana. And so we are really interested in talking to you today about what you've done in the City of Monroe, how you've responded to COVID-19, and the challenges that you're seeing. And so I have with me today Marc Keenan and Stacey Rowell from Monroe. And if each of you would just introduce yourself very briefly, and then we'll get into a little bit of meat.
Okay. Stacey, I guess I'll go ahead. My name is Marc Keenan, General Manager of the Monroe Transit System. I've been here since 2014. I have been in transportation for over 30 years. Majority of that has been as in management positions. I currently am a contractor. I work with First Transit Incorporated out of Cincinnati, Ohio.
Okay, thank you. Stacey?
Hi, Stacey Rowell, and I'm the Director of Administration for the City of Monroe. And we're delighted to be a part of this.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We want to talk about what a federal-local partnership looks like, and when it works well, when the federal government supports local government, how those dollars are truly being used and what that looks like on the ground. So Marc or Stacey, we'll start with you. Just tell us a little bit about how COVID is affecting the City of Monroe, and if you are doing anything innovative, or is there anything that you're seeing that's working as far as the relationship between the federal and local government goes?
Well, I'll start with, I guess, what we came to talk about was transit. That's
Yes.
an example. We were looking at about a $3.4 million shortfall. Our budget, well, let me start off, our fiscal year starts May 1. So this hit us at the end of our fiscal year. We don't have time to rebound from the March and April closures. So we were looking ahead and not knowing how long this was going to go on, potentially a $3.2 million deficit, 3.4 million, somewhere in that nature, not, again, just guessing at how these numbers were going to affect us, the closures and all. So, we were looking at furloughs, layoffs, whatever we would have to do. We generally subsidize transit to the tune of a little over $2 million a year. So when we started hearing about the federal dollars coming down through the FTA, Marc was right on top of it, thank goodness, and kept us abreast of everything. And because of that money, we're basically going to be looking at potentially around 1.2 million by the time we take into account what all it is going to do for us. And I want to leave stuff for Marc to talk about, so I'm not going to talk a whole lot about what all it can be used for and all that kind of stuff. But basically, because we will not have to subsidize, general fund won't have to subsidize at all next year, or actually this fiscal year now, because it's after May now. But that just has made a huge difference in what we have had to cut across the board in our other departments. So that being said, I want to make sure I leave enough for Marc to talk about the specifics. That's been just huge for us. We've also, I'll briefly mention, we've also gotten the funding for our airport. Even though we don't subsidize our airport, that means we won't have to subsidize it now because of the revenue losses that they were looking at. There was a potential there that we were going to have to start picking up something out there, but because of that federal funding as well, we don't have to worry about the airport so much. So that's another area those federal dollars have come into play. So specifically.
Okay, Stacey, just a follow up to that. What would things have looked like if you had not gotten, and you spoke to it, but just in real world example, what may have happened if you had not received that grant? How deep, what furloughs and layoffs and those sorts of things, what could you have been looking at?
Well, we implemented a 25% supplies, we cut them 25%. We cut travel 50% because we aren't anticipating much travel anyway. We cut overtime in half. And of course, some of that, you're just hopeful that you can live by, because we also had a tornado in the middle of April, I guess, Easter weekend, that kind of threw some of this all into limbo. But we're trying to hold everyone to it now that we've kind of started recovering from that. But we also, the biggest thing was that we ended up going ahead and furloughing 1 hour a week for all employees across the board. And that was basically our gap. And so we settled for the least amount of furloughing time that we could. And, we cut as much as we could elsewhere. People still have to have supplies to work with and things like that. So you can't just say, oh, we're not going to, buy anything. That's just not, logical. So this was our gap, and we tried to make that as little as we possibly could. So without some of this money, that gap would have been much larger, and we would have been furloughing probably days instead of hours.
Wow, that's major. That's major. Marc, if you want to jump in, just kind of tell us about the grant and that process, and what you guys are seeing now as a result of it.
Okay, sounds good. Yes, we received that CARES Act funding. I think it was about in late March when we found out the information on it. It was allocated $25 billion for transit. And so out of that, we received $4.7 million, which was really a blessing for us, because as Stacey has already mentioned, as part of the budgeting process, we are having, transit is still during the COVID-19 pandemic, we're still providing service without any interruption. We're providing it every day. The schedule is still the same. And so being part of the city, we're having to look at our budget and our operation and trying to help to save as much as we could. And so when we received the funding and we found out it was 100% of federal participation, the city has nothing to pay at all. I was very excited to bring that to the city, because I knew that it was going to be very helpful, not just the transit, but also the budget. And so we've implemented that into our system. And the first thing we wanted to look at was how are we going to address COVID-19 to keep our employees safe.
Right.
So we've gone out and we've purchased driver barriers, sort of like the plexiglass you see at grocery stores.
Right.
We've purchased that item. We're also looking at purchasing wheelchair securement locations where the driver does not have to get close quarters with the passenger to secure them. So this system allows the passenger themselves to secure themselves. So which is pretty safe for our drivers not to have to be in close quarters with passengers. We've also implemented passengers boarding and disboarding or unboarding or getting off the bus out of the rear door. So they're not really close to the passenger. Part of that process ended up being free fare. So the passenger pays nothing, and of course the city doesn't get any revenue. Okay. The federal government can't pay the city revenue for the revenue that was missed, but the CARES Act could be used for operations of the city for transit going all the way back to January 20th, I think that date was. So very beneficial during the time of the COVID-19 pandemic. The city is not having to support transit during that time period and going forward. So what the city ended up doing is about 3.2 million of that 4.7 is just for the operation of the system, which is very helpful for the city and also transit. But we're still trying to do the best that we can to efficiently run the system and support the city in trying to cut as much cost as possible.
Marc, was there anything that you had to do to apply for the funding, or what was the process to be able to get it?
Well, what generally happens when feds send money to states, to cities, what they usually do is they have a formula that they already have set up for the cities, for the agencies. And so based upon that, our pot of that pie was 4.8 million. Okay, but we still have to take that money, go to TRAMS, which you have to do to apply for the funding. So they tell you you're going to get X amount of funding, but you still have to apply for it, telling the feds exactly what you're going to do with it, what projects and how you're going to spend it. And so they have to look at what your plans are, and then they will approve and make sure that it's done correctly.
Okay, so is it safe to say every municipality or every transit system in the state has these allocated funds? They just need to go in and apply for it?
Each agency, transit agency that is federally funded, they've already received the announcement telling how much they have. So they should already be aware. So yes, and part of that process, you have to go in to apply for it once you receive that notification. Now, you can go to the FTA website, fta.transit.gov. You can go to that website and go to the CARES Act funding portion of it, and it has a list of all the agencies and how much funding each agency received.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
And let me tell you again, the correct website is transit.dot.gov.
Transit.dot.gov.
Right.
Transit.dot.gov, and they can go there and find out their allocation and complete the application to be able to draw down those funds.
Right. They can go there to find out how much they're allocated.
Okay.
They have to go to a separate website to actually apply for it.
Got it. All right. Thank you. This has been amazing and helpful information. Just in case there are some agencies out there who haven't acted on it or didn't realize it, or maybe some of the smaller areas don't have the capacity to act on it right now. We put the information out there so that they know and they understand that it's available, and hopefully everybody can respond now and receive those needed funds. Stacey, both you and Marc, are there any other thoughts that you could share with your peers across the state about the response to COVID? Any parting thoughts or words or lessons learned, words of wisdom that you'd like to leave us with?
Marc?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with preparation. How could you prepare for COVID? I mean, you really can't. But as far as your everyday cleaning of vehicles, making sure people are safe, it should be an ongoing thing. You shouldn't really have to prepare a whole lot for when something like this arrives or happens. One of the issues that we've had, one of the challenges, is just PPE, basic PPE and mask. We've really have had difficulty getting the proper PPE. I think that the avenues now are opening up now more so that we're able to get a little bit of it. However, we have passengers that get on the bus. Some of them do not have masks or anything like that to wear. And so we don't make it mandatory that they wear it. But we would like to be able to have that to give the passengers just so they can be able to wear it if they really want to do so.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you both so much. And Stacey, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
No, basically just prepare for the worst and hope for the best. It's basically kind of what we've done, taking that position. And I say we've prepared for the worst. We've run scenarios and multiple scenarios on revenue, different revenue forecasts, and we just kind of have taken the middle of the road approach, I guess, so that we aren't just in full-blown panic mode and cutting too deeply, but at the same time trying to balance that with people still have to live and pay bills and whatnot. So we're trying to keep our doors open, as far as for our employees and things that we can, but we've tried to strike that balance. So
good deal. Well, I want to thank you both for just taking those few minutes out to have this conversation. I believe this information will be so helpful to our members across the state, and we wish you all the best as you and the rest of us continue to fight this COVID war and recover. We enjoyed so much being in the City of Monroe for our convention last year, and we look forward to coming back to a healthier, stronger Monroe and riding those buses that we rode during our convention. Everything was great, so we look forward to it and wish you all the best. Thank you both.